It makes no sense to be doing this. But I think maybe one of the most egregious parts of the bill that I want to focus on for a few minutes really goes back to those values issues. You know, it's one thing to make abortions legal. It's quite another thing to force Americans who consider abortion immoral based on their just moral beliefs, their religious beliefs. It's immoral to make them pay for it, to actually promote abortions. And that's what this bill does. Everywhere you turn, this administration is promoting anti-life initiatives and advancing policies that most Americans find morally objectionable, namely taxpayer-funded abortions. We've seen that throughout this health care debate, and we've seen now in the very set of bills that fund our government, that it is promoting and funding abortion. Folks, this nation has had a debate about whether we should even allow abortions to be legal. But we have been in general agreement as a nation, and even here in the Congress for years, that we should not force taxpayers to pay for abortion. That's a terrible use of the power of government. The omnibus bill reported by the House Senate Conference allows taxpayer funds to be used to pay for elective abortions in the District of Columbia. Because Congress controls D.C.'s entire budget, including appropriating the city's local revenues, if this omnibus bill passes, Congress will be allowing U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund abortion on demand where it was previously prohibited. This is a major shift in policy. We must step back and see where our priorities are as a nation. The values of our country are at stake in this legislation. And as we look at this, I hope no American is so naive as to think that if they pass this government takeover of health care, that no matter what we put in the legislation, they will eventually fund elective abortions in this country. It shows everywhere they pass a piece of legislation, they are trying to promote abortion in this country. A vote for the omnibus is a vote for taxpayer-funded abortion. A vote against Senator McCain's point of order is a vote for taxpayer-funded abortion. It's simple, it's clear. Congress is responsible for the budget and the way its funds are spent. If we don't think the government should create an incentive for taking unborn lives, then we should not allow it in the legislation before us today. In addition to this troubling revelation, the bill contains many other egregious reversals of long-standing policy contradicting traditional American values. The underlying bill legalizes medical marijuana and uses federal funds to establish a needle exchange program in Washington, D.C. Both encourage the use of drugs. And this is another glimpse of what's going to happen with government-run health care. If this Congress is promoting the use of medical marijuana, needle exchange programs, abortion, in this funding bill, does anyone really believe that that won't be a part of a government-run health care system? Of course not. Additionally, this bill eliminates the successful D.C. Scholarship Opportunity Program, which aids low-income children by giving them scholarships to attend private schools in Washington, D.C. This affects only about 1,500 children, and I've had a chance to meet with some of them, who are in schools that just aren't working. And this small scholarship program allowed disadvantaged, primarily minority students here in Washington, D.C., to go to a private school of their choice. And remarkably, in just a few years, the students who moved from the government schools to the private schools were 2 years ahead of their peers. It's an example of something that's working, that's helping disadvantaged students. And it's a good example of an administration that is more interested in paying off union interest, in this case the teachers union, than doing what's good for our children in our country. To eliminate this program, this small, inexpensive program, is absurd. But it reveals to you, no, I won't. It reveals to you the true motives of the majority. And if we look at this bill, and if we look at this eventual health care bill, if we ever have time to see it before they try to pass it, we're beginning to see a real glimpse, a true picture of where this Democrat majority is going. And finally, this bill increases the funding for Title X family planning services, of which Planned Parenthood is the largest recipient. Folks, Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest provider of abortions. And increasingly, they are what we call directed abortions. When people come to Planned Parenthood and look for advice on family planning, they're more often than not encouraged and pushed towards abortion. So all around this bill, you see what's going on is a major change in policy, not to make abortion available, but to make Americans pay for it and to promote it. I, along with 34 of my colleagues here in the Senate, signed and sent a letter to the Majority Leader regarding the troubling anti-life policies in this omnibus bill. Collectively, we vowed to speak out to protect the long-standing federal funding limitations on abortion, a belief that has enjoyed broad bipartisan support for many years. For this reason, as well as a number of other values issues that are irresponsibly addressed in this legislation, I support Senator McCain, who raised a point of order against the omnibus under Rule 28 of the standing rules of the Senate. And I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I remind my colleagues, a vote against the McCain point of order is a vote to force American taxpayers to promote and pay for abortion. It's plain and simple. I'm sure there'll be a lot of smoke and mirrors after my talk that will try to convince you that's not true. But it's in the legislation, and it will happen, and we need to stop it. I thank you, Mr. President. And